Here's how I got an autistic boy to learn how to play cards, and the strategy can be applied to teaching almost anything. Years ago, I was working with a young family, and I asked the father, "What would you most like for your autistic son to learn?" And he said, "I just love playing cards, and I'd love him to play cards with me." The boy was about 7 years old. And so I observed a little bit the boy playing with the father, and what I noticed is that the dad was so focused on teaching him how to play a solitaire game of cards, and the boy just wanted to kind of run around the room and be a bit silly. And the boy actually liked to take the cards and throw them around a little bit. So I got an idea. I decided I would become the card monster because this boy really liked to play. And so I took a deck of cards before seeing him, and I taped the whole deck of cards around my body, including on my face and my ear and all over. And when it was my turn to go and do a therapy session with this young 7-year-old, I walked into the room, can you imagine, totally covered in cards. And what this boy did is he stopped what he was doing, he turned around and he looked at me, and he got this big smile. Well, he ran over and he immediately started pulling off the cards to look at them. And once all of the cards were pulled off of me and they were all on the floor, I looked at them. I said, "Hey, we gotta find the number 3." And I just picked a number and I started modeling to him. I'd pick one and I'd slam it on the ground. I'd pick another one up and put it on the ground. And so now I was getting him to start picking up cards and looking for the number. We were already halfway to the goal of getting him to learn how to play solitaire. And so as we did this, I started to arrange them in a square pattern like this. Well, how the story played out was that this boy was totally willing, after several sessions with me, for me to bring in some cards, put them down, learn how to flip them up and look for certain numbers, and he was well on his way to learning how to play cards. A couple of months later, I got a call from the parents, and they said he was so interested to sit down and play with his dad, and he learned a couple of different games. The father was totally delighted. So what's the strategy? Well, as you can hear, I was really playful. But there's something else I was doing in my mind that made all of the difference. And that is I shifted from can't to can. You see, the father had already tried and he had enough experience and evidence that his son can't play. And so the father had concluded, my son can't do it, even though the father deeply wanted that, to be able to share that joy with his son. He believed he couldn't. And so the father wasn't able to be creative. He wasn't able to go and try because he was thinking he can't. I showed up, I'm new on the scene, I don't have that history, I get it, but I started with an idea that this boy can do it. He can learn. It might take us 3 or 4 or 5 days. It might take 3 or 4 or 5 months, but it's totally possible. And so I went in, was creative, and every little step I got towards that goal with him, I cheered. You know, years ago when I was a young boy, when I was about 7 years old, like this little boy that I was working with, my grandmother used to grow vegetables. And I remember that I would go out with her in the rows of vegetables, and I would see some of the vegetables that were ready, ripe, and picked, and I would look for the tomatoes we could pick, and I looked for the carrots you could pull out of the ground because I liked that part. But my grandmother's eyes were often focused on the little sprouts that were coming up. And over a while of going into her garden over the summers, I really learned that what your eyes want to look for is the little sprouts that are coming up, because that's what you need to tend to. So if she saw a little sprout, she'd go over and sometimes push some earth around it or water it, or even talk to the little sprout saying, "Hey, little sprout, can't wait for you to grow up," kind of thing. So she really focused on nurturing what was coming up. And years later, when I became an autism therapist and I was training parents and other therapists, I used this idea to focus on little evidence that you see that your child is moving in the direction you want to go to. I wanted to share this quick story with you. I remember a remarkable session, a play therapy session that I observed in one of my mentors. And I wrote about this actually in my book, Challenging the Myths of Autism. And it was a session when this little girl who was learning how to talk, and in fact, a lot of the therapists around her, the speech therapists and parents, didn't really believe that she could talk. But there we were, this therapist team, we're trying to get her to try. And so my mentor, he was in the room and he looked at her and he had written a letter, an alphabet letter on a piece of paper. And he held it up to her. Now, everybody who was watching this, the adults, all thought, no way, this girl can't say that or read that, because we didn't think she could read or even talk. But watch what happened. He held up this letter and he looked at her and he said, hey, tell me what this is. And what he was doing is he was looking for the little sprouts, the little evidence that she was trying, because the very first thing he said is, yes, you're looking at the page. Good girl, way to go. He just celebrated that she was even looking. It's like a little sprout that he watered. And so he got her to look more. And then she sort of blinked and it looked like she was really thinking. Now, we don't know if she was or wasn't, but he celebrated. He said, yes, I can see that you're really thinking about this. You're really looking, way to go. And she stayed totally present and there in the chair. And he said, come on, make a sound. And her mouth just moved just a little bit, almost imperceptibly. She made what would be like a "buh" sound. Well, guess what? The letter that he had here was A. And so he interpreted it to be a letter, the letter B was really close to A. And he cheered her and he said, yes, that's a great sound. That's the letter B. And you know what? That's right beside this letter here. You're really, really close. Keep trying. Well, this little girl didn't say the letter A in the end, in this particular one session. But I'll tell you what, she kept trying. She got celebrated, lots of celebration for her attempts. She was happy. She wasn't pushed. I think she probably felt kind of proud for the stuff that she did. And I'm certain that when my mentor, this trainer, came back the next day, she was excited and ready to try again. He ignited her learning. And the point here is, he looked for those little sprouts because in his mind, he was thinking she can instead of she can't. So if there's a challenge that you have with your child or a goal that you have that you want for them, do these two things. First of all, just believe that they can do it. And when we say they can do it, it doesn't mean that tomorrow they're going to be a champion or the next day they'll be an expert or that they'll master this behavior even within a week or 2 months. But when we say they can, we mean they can start taking steps in that direction. They can take, even if it's a micro, little tiny step, a little germination, a little sprout where they show you evidence. And then the second thing is for you to start looking for that evidence. Be a scout, hunt for it, look for evidence that your child is trying, look for evidence that they're getting there, look for evidence that they're starting to even learn parts of it. And then cheer and celebrate, and you'll feel good and your child will feel good, and you will start taking steps in the direction.